Oh, and I didn't introduce my classmates. That was so rude of me. This is Ellie and Sarah and Katie. Hi. So, like Tracey had just said, we're going to be talking about emotions and emotional wellness today. Just a little breakdown of how our presentation is going to go is I'm going to talk about normal development, normal emotional development, or typical emotional development in adolescence. Katie's going to talk about unwellness, or maybe some warning signs with emotional development that might lead to you guys seeking out some counseling services or lead to some other support services that may be necessary. And then we're going to give you guys some strategies for emotions, or how to talk about emotions with your grandchildren. And Tracey's going to be talking about family activities and something called emotion coaching. And then Sarah's going to be talking about mindfulness. So that's just how our day is going to go today. I would like to start off by explaining a little bit about our theme for the day. So in our research, reading the literature, watching videos, looking at activities, we noticed a pretty common theme of emotions being, or metaphors as water being used in terms to describe emotions. And then I looked into it a little bit more because I just found that really interesting. And what I found was that cross generations, cross cultures, throughout history, people have always referred to water or the ocean in terms of emotions and how we look at our emotions inside of us. So we are going to be using a lot of metaphors that tie back to the ocean today, just as something fun, something useful to help us remember what we learned today. Two of those common themes in the metaphors that we found was that people tend to speak about emotion in terms of containers. We feel empty. We feel like you could pour out our sadness. We feel bottled up. We feel like our anger could boil over the pot. So there's lots of ways that we talk about our emotions being contained. And we also speak about emotions in terms of natural forces. We talk about being stormy inside of us, or feeling waves of emotion, or feeling currents pulling us along within our emotions. So again, we're just going to be referencing that a lot. And because of that, we've actually decided to call our presentation today the ocean of emotions in adolescence, which is really hard to say. There's a lot of vowels in there, but the ocean of emotions in adolescence. So before we start talking about development, Katie and I wanted to take a minute to do kind of a recentering activity to get us into the room today to bring some presence into what we're talking about. I'm sure it's pretty stressful getting your grandkids ready for school and getting them out the door in the morning. Maybe you guys were running errands. You were probably having busy mornings before you came here. So this is an activity called Your Own Bubble. It comes from this mindfulness games pack that's over here. And if you guys would like to look at it, feel free to grab books. All of those books sitting there are the books that we're going to reference today, so feel free to grab them, look through them if you're interested. This is a great activity to do with young children and to do with teenagers, and it just gives a visual or some imagery to put with your emotions to make it a little more understandable. So if you guys want to take a minute, maybe shake your arms out, maybe lean back to your chair, stretch your neck, get a little comfortable, just kind of get a little loose. Yeah. Katie's going to demonstrate some things for us if you'd like to see that visual.
And if you don't, you're still going to see it anyways.
That's true. So if you guys want to close your eyes, you're more than welcome to. If you'd rather have them open, that's perfectly okay too. You want to take some deep breaths and center yourself. And I'd like you guys to imagine as if there's a bubble around you. And this bubble, where it's in relation to your body, and if this bubble is holding your emotions or not today. Maybe take your pointer finger and draw that bubble around yourself. And notice whether or not that bubble is thick, if it's thin. Can that bubble be easily popped today? Or is it resistant? Can it hold you? Is it close to your body? Is it confining? Or is it big and do you have space in it? Is it clear or is it soapy? Is it rigid? Is it soft? There's lots of different things that you can pull out of this in terms of emotions. If you feel like you can be easily popped today, maybe that's some anger built up or some sadness built up in you. Or maybe if you're feeling a little more resistant, better day with your emotions. So yeah, if you guys want to take just a couple breaths and think about your bubble and where it is for you. And then we'll come back. If you guys want to open your eyes, maybe look around the room. And just keep thinking of that bubble today when we're talking about emotions. Funnily enough, when we start talking about emotions, it seems like a lot of emotions start to well up in people. So keep checking in on your bubble throughout our conversation today. And keep thinking about how maybe this bubble might be useful with your grandchildren. It says on here some tips and tricks for kids when you do this with them is maybe pretend as if you can pop their bubble and see if you can get into their bubble, see if you can get in their bubble with them and expand their bubble. I'm sure you can think of a lot of different ways that this would work with children. So yeah. Okay. So now that we're a little recentered, I'd like to talk about emotional development in children. I'm going to be speaking about it from Gazelle's maturation theory. It's a specific developmental theory perspective. And what Gazelle did, or the Gazelle Institute did, was they interviewed hundreds of families, hundreds of parents, grandparents, friends of parents, all sorts of people, as well as children, in order to get a perspective on how emotional development looked in families. And really what they came to find was that it seems as though children fall in and out of these cycles of what they call equilibrium and disequilibrium, or regulation and dysregulation. And it seemed to have this spiral effect almost. It seemed to be that 10-year-olds were at this equilibrium state, they were doing good, they were calm, collected, and then at 11 they fell into this disequilibrium. It became chaotic and confusing, and they were having a much harder time getting a handle of their emotions. And then when they were 12, they kind of came back into this equilibrium state again. They were doing okay. And then 13, they fell back into disequilibrium. And it really seemed to be this cycle on a year-to-year basis for whatever reason. My own personal opinion is probably puberty. You know, they go through these huge waves of puberty at that time. So for me, that's how I like to conceptualize it, or how I like to see it. And in Gazelle's maturation theory, they talked about how they believe that this happens because kids learn new skills, and this forces them into this disequilibrium as they're trying to figure out what these new skills are, how they can use them in life. With these new skills, does that mean that they have to throw out the old skills that they had, or can they bring them in with their new skills? It's a confusing time trying to figure that out and practice those skills. So they fall into that disequilibrium. And when they've got it down, they go back into that equilibrium. And during this time, a lot of kids can either become insecure, they can gain a lot of confidence with this. As I'm sure you can imagine, when kids are really trying hard and learning something and they're not successful at it, maybe having failure after failure, those insecurities start to set in. And that's when Gazelle said that kids start to go internal. They start to withdraw and maybe isolate themselves a little more. They break down in their communication. They don't speak with other people as much, even their friends as much. But then once they've gained these new skills, Gazelle said that they outwardized. They came back out. They became more outgoing and enthusiastic and started communicating again. And that seemed to follow that same pattern of equilibrium and disequilibrium in that spiral. So, yeah. So then in terms of actual age groups, we're presenting on that adolescence today. So we're really only going to be talking about ages 10 to 14-ish. So some of the things that they found with 10-year-olds is that they're very matter of fact. You know, they like their things black and white. This is the world. This is how I see it. That's their general state. Gazelle really only looked at anger and sadness and worry, because those seem to be the conflicting emotions that they experienced in families when they were looking at the interviews. When we think of those happier emotions, those joyful emotions, those don't tend to be the conflicts that occur in families. Yeah. So I'm really only going to be talking about anger, worry, sadness, and those things today. So at 10-year-olds, they talked about how their anger still tends to be tantrums, stomping feet, slamming doors, maybe yelling, getting attention in that way. Their worries still tend to be very quote-unquote childish worries. You know, fear of the dark, fear of dogs, fear of animals, and maybe fear of tests, spiders. Which, you know, dogs are still very afraid of. But they still tend to be in that emotional state where they're not so much thinking about the whole world as they are just thinking about themselves. In terms of their relationships at this age, they tend to have a lot of admiration and respect for their elders. For adults in general, whether that's their teachers, their grandparents, friends' parents, they tend to have a lot of respect for people. And this respect seems to fall into that 11-year-old range too. However, 11-year-olds fall into that disequilibrium. This was the most reported age of anger, worry, where this occurred the most for children. Some of the general emotions, some themes that they found in this was a lot of people described them as being sensitive, being selfish, argumentative, having highs and lows, almost feeling like they're on a roller coaster at that age. It seems like their anger at this age moves from that physical, throwing tantrums, into that verbal, where they start to argue, maybe throw out some insults in conversation. Maybe on the brink of sarcasm, but not really understanding how to use sarcasm effectively. Yelling, retorting, things like that. In terms of their worries, this is when they start to move into that social worry. Am I going to fit in? Am I going to have friends? You know, I don't want to go to school today because I don't have any friends and I don't want to go. But can they communicate that to you? That's really the thing. So that 10-year-old's in equilibrium, whereas that 11-year-old's in disequilibrium. And then they come back around at 12 years old. They're often described as outgoing, reasonable, thoughtful, good company. They're fun to hang out with at this age. Their verbal arguments are still the ways that they express anger, but they're starting to land more things in it, and humor and sarcasm. They're starting to use things in more effective ways that communicate their anger rather than just throwing their anger at you. This is also the time when they're described as sitting and seething. They're starting to go a little inward with their emotions. They want to try to figure out how to handle those emotions on their own, but they may not be very successful with that. And they really want to prove themselves. They want to prove that they can take care of themselves. But at the end of the day, they're 12 years old. They're still trying to figure it out. I mean, even as adults, we're still trying to figure out our emotions a lot of the time. So, yeah, that 12-year-old age. They really pointed out in this book that's on the table that this is the age when they start to pull away from family relationships, which is very normal development. They start to pull away from families and they start to seek out more social relationships, more friendships, and how they can support themselves in that way. This was described as a really hard time for caregivers. It starts to be lonely, a little sad. Some caregivers start to take that a little personally. You know, they don't want to hang out with me anymore. What am I going to do? I'm not fun anymore. Some of those things started to come out. When in reality, it's very normal development that they would start to seek out how to support themselves. So then when we look at 13-year-olds, they fall back into this disequilibrium. Or into equilibrium, sorry. They start to become more thoughtful, more inward, more quiet. And this is the time in their anger that they really start to isolate themselves. I'm going to go to my room all night, close the door, not open it up for you, turn on my music so I can't hear you, because I just want to be by myself. I want to try to think this through. I want to try to calm myself down. And maybe when I'm feeling better, I'll come out and talk to you about it. But this is really when they start to gain a lot more independence with their emotional states. I think an important thing that I noticed in this was at this point, a lot of children described that they couldn't control their emotions, that they were feeling a lot of anger or a lot of sadness, a lot of hurt or worry, and they weren't really understanding why. They didn't know where it was coming from, and because of that, they didn't know how to talk to people about it. So for me, that was a really important thing for me to understand, that they don't necessarily have a reason for their emotions. And then that becomes a difficult issue of, well, how do you talk about it if there's no reason to talk about it? So Tracey's going to talk about that a little bit more in the emotion coaching. And then lastly, 14-year-olds, they come back into this equilibrium again. They're described as being outgoing, energetic, enthusiastic, They may still use that verbal insult as a way to express their anger, but really at this stage it seems like they start to have those payback plans, those revenge. Oh, well, I'm going to go out with my girlfriend on Friday night even though you said that I couldn't. I'm going to sneak out of the house. It starts to be those types of things that they get into, which again is very normal development. It's very typical development. And at this point, their largest worries really start to become about the world. They start to learn about politics and cultural issues and societal issues. So their worries start to become much bigger. And with those bigger worries, those are bigger things to tackle in communication and conversation with them. And they can be very charged conversations too, especially if you guys don't see eye to eye. So, they really talk about continuing to check in with your children, continuing to check in with your grandchildren and see where they're at, and really having a listening ear with them at this age. This is also a time when there tends to be a lot of conflict in their social relationships. There starts to be a lot of arguments with their friendships and their friendship circles. They're really finding out who are good friends, who are really supportive friends, and who are not, who can I trust and who can I not. So it's still a very tumultuous stage for them at this point. But they're still in that equilibrium. They've got a good handle on how their emotions should be handled and how they can handle their emotions. So I hope that gives a little bit more of a representation of how those kids fall into that regulation and then out of that regulation, and into that regulation and out of that regulation. Yeah. So Katie's going to talk about that unhealth now.
Hi, everyone. So the handout I'm going to talk about first is the mental health continuum handout. And so our culture and society is really so focused on what's wrong, what's going wrong, the negatives. We're not looking ahead to positive things. The way society works is we're focused on the negative things. And that has certainly played a role in how we view health and wellness. And that's really not fair because wellness can't be defined that way. Wellness changes as people grow and develop, and just like their health does. So that's why this continuum is exactly what it's called, as a continuum, because we're not being forced into this box. Because I think another part of society is that they want you to fit in this form box, and this continuum gives you the opportunity to be like, oh, I don't have to stay here. You can move through the different stages and different aspects of how you grow and develop. That kind of coincides with what Ellie was talking about. So it gives us a visual to help make sense of what's happening in kids, their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors. And while your grandchild might be on one end of the spectrum today, like they might be, I'm going to go with the ocean and say this red is Category 5 hurricane. They might be over here today, but in 2 hours or tomorrow they could be over in calm water. So, and that's normal, as she explained. So they're not stuck, and as they evolve and change and become more aware, they're going to move through this continuum, and they're not going to be in one place forever. I mean, I'm not even in one place the same day. It's unfair to put kids in that kind of box. So when we look at this continuum, and you start to think about your own grandchildren, also I didn't mention, but grades 1 through 7 is the first page, and then secondary 8 through 12 is the second page. So it's it's a little bit different, and it's from Australia, so we had to figure out exactly what grades it was talking about. But when we look at it, when you're thinking about your own grandchildren, there are important areas to consider when you're trying to figure out, okay, where are they? Is this a problem? Is this okay? Their age and stage of development, so kind of going off of what Ellie just explained, thinking about some of those things, that's important when you're looking at this. How many areas of their life are being affected? Are they all in the red? Are they kind of across the board? I'm just thinking about those things. The environment where the concern or the behavior is occurring. Is it at home, at school, both, with their friends? And then thinking about what maybe is happening right before it, during it, and then after it. And then how frequent are these things happening? And then how long has this been present? And I think one of the most important things is also, how are these behaviors influencing their day-to-day life? Are they able to perform in school? Are they able to do their extracurricular activities? Thinking about those things. And I also think it's really important to note that there's no formula for this continuum. There's no formula that says if my grandchild is in the orange all the time, that's bad. Like there is no, because every child is different. Every child has different experiences that could influence where they're at in here. And so it's not, so it's hard to say like what is okay and what's not, because if there is no formula, because every child has different experiences. But what is important to note is kind of looking at where, if they're staying in the red, I would say in the hurricane category 5 all the time, that would be a point to consider consulting with your pediatrician or a mental health provider, because typically they're going to fluctuate, and that's okay. And so it's just important to know, like, oh, like we're doing okay, we're in the mild, like this is okay. And it's just gives you a visual and a better understanding, maybe in more simpler terms, kind of how to use this. So I think this is really helpful, and I like how simple it is lined out and easy to understand. So the next point that I am going to talk about is kind of, Ellie talked about the developmental piece, and I'm going to talk about kind of what's going on inside of themselves right now at this 10 to 14 age, because there's a lot happening, and it kind of ties into why they may be behaving this way, why they may be in the red a lot. And so we have 3 major parts going on here. We have their brain is developing, we have their behavior systems are developing, and we have their thinking systems are developing. And they're all developing at different rates, at different stages. So the brain could have been developed, but the behavior and thinking, not so much. And so these 3 huge systems are developing, and they're all using the same internal processes to develop and grow, and that creates a lot of chaos in a person. And that's why this stage is really been said to be they're super vulnerable, and it's a huge adjustment period, because all these things are happening, and they're not sure how to really make sense of it. And also, what was I also going to say? Oh, and their thinking brain can impact their emotions, and their emotions can impact their thinking brain. So they're not as able to understand really what's going on. And their emotional development, they're having new and more intense emotional experiences at this stage, and they also are experiencing more frequent and intense emotions than younger kids are, and then older adults. So this is just a really supercharged time in their life, and they're trying to develop and grow and understand and deal with the context of family and school and friends. So it just creates their own hurricane, and they have to figure out how to go through it. So now I'm going to talk about emotion regulation and emotional differentiation. And they go really well together, and they're both important for promoting positive development, resilience, and well-being in adolescents. And depending on how they develop and how they learn, they can also be a contributing factor to some behavioral and emotional problems as well. So it's kind of on both sides. Emotions help us understand how we're feeling, how we're doing, and what we want. And emotion regulation are the processes that help the adolescent respond to, manage, and change their emotional reactions that meet their own goals, and then that meet the environmental context. So family, school, culture. And it's conscious. It's a conscious act. So they use their thinking brain to do this. And as I just explained, their thinking brain may not be as well developed as their thinking system may not be as well developed. And if they're influenced by their emotions, they may not be able to do this. And so that's important to understand. They just might not be capable. And so some less effective ways of responding to emotions that I found are denial, ruminating, which my mom always said was sitting and stewing about them, escaping, avoiding, and then doing nothing about them. And then these have been shown, so in a study that I found, adolescents who said they had more intense emotions, greater fluctuations in their mood, and then less effective, they used the less effective techniques, they reported more depressive symptoms and problem behaviors. So being able to really understand what's going on and use different techniques can really help them maybe avoid some of these potential problems and depressive symptoms. So if you're thinking that your grandchild is experiencing super intense emotions and they're having significant fluctuations in their mood, then observing how they respond to those could give you some insight in how you can help support and support them to work through that. And emotional differentiation is a tool that can help this. And it is, it's a pretty cool thing. So there is a difference between your feelings and your emotions, which was news to me. But it's emotional differentiation is how much people can tell the difference between their feelings and their emotions. And this varies in everyone. Some people are not as able to do this as others. And it also can be taught. So think about this. If you're feeling angry and jealous at the same time, it can be hard to tell the difference between them, and it can be just as hard sitting in that. Trying to figure out how to respond and what's more important and what's taking over. And if we struggle to do that, we can't expect an adolescent to do that without having any tools or knowing what that even looks like. And that's why it's so important. And if they and if they don't know how, then they get overwhelmed, and then they can find themselves in a hurricane of their own emotions. They're overwhelmed, they don't know what they're feeling, they don't know how to communicate it, and it just kind of creates this really big storm. So that's why focusing on emotional differentiation in kids is so valuable and so helpful, because they don't have to be lost, and you don't have to be lost at sea with them. And teaching them how to be able to regulate and react in a more appropriate way, they can also feel more control over what's going on, and that control can help them feel more powerful and able to overcome what they're experiencing. And another study showed that those who are able to better differentiate, especially the negative emotions, have higher rates of well-being. They experience less intense emotions, and because of that, they're less overwhelmed, so then they can differentiate better. I just think emotional differentiation gives them, I guess, a lifeboat, if we're going with the ocean metaphor, to get in as they try to go through this stage of development. There's just a lot going on with them. And Tracey and Sarah are going to give you some tips and tricks on how to kind of help make these things be aware for them and help you guys work through that with them. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but just think about what happens for you when an emotional storm hits your house. What do you do? How do you respond? How do you react? Are you pulled out to sea with them, or do you have a raft that you get on that you can kind of stand up on and kind of help them? And those are just some things to think about. And Tracey is going to continue on this emotion coaching route, but just think about those things.
So we've given you a lot of information. There is so much going on with emotions. We've talked about how kids develop, different emotions that they feel, what they go through, trying to manage all of those. And I know when I was raising my kids and even working with kids in schools now, I love understanding the reason behind why things are happening, and I want to know what to do. I want to know, what do I do? I remember feeling that way when my son was 12 and 13. What do I even do with this kid? What can we do as parents, grandparents, caregivers when those seas get stormy at home, they get stirred up? How do we keep ourselves from getting sucked into the undertow of their emotions? So we're going to shift gears and talk about tips and techniques. And I'm going to talk about something called emotional coaching. And I was trying to think today of how to tie this into the sea, and I thought it's kind of like you're navigating the ship of your family through the emotional sea. You are the captain of emotions, and you want to lead your children through that. And we want to talk about some things that could help you chart a course so you don't feel as off track and off course. I think before we talk about how to lead someone else, though, it's always good to take a step back and to look at ourselves. So I'm going to throw a couple of things out there, and you can think about them, and then we'll talk about it for a few minutes. So think back to when you were a kid. How were emotions handled in your house? Were they addressed? Were they not addressed? Go to your room. Okay.
I don't remember ever talking about emotions.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. Never
Yeah.
talked.
So it wasn't something that was really discussed. Pardon?
Stuff.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the unimportance of them.
Okay.
Just
Not.
yeah,
All right.
we're not going to deal with that.
Okay.
You don't have those.
See,
So not-
that hurt.
So not valued. So like Katie was saying, some denial.
Yeah.
So think about yourself now. How, when you have emotions and things like that that come up, how do you recognize them or label them or acknowledge them or do you? Are you able to? You all have so much on your plate as caregivers.
I think I recognize it, but I'm really good at stuffing it.
Okay.
And then I find someplace to let it go.
Okay.
But I gotta find a safe place to let it go.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think through 2 treatment centers, because I had a son to go through and a husband I went through, and then dealing with alcohol and drug addicts pretty much 24/7, you learn a lot, and you learn how to use your words right. Like this is how I feel when,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Okay.
know,
You have to
or
be
you know,
Yeah.
how does that make you feel when so and so's
Sure.
doing that to you? You say,
Okay.
you know. So I think I've grown.
Okay.
Where I never said that years ago.
So you've gained some
Yeah, which is
you've gained some life raft, maybe a life preserver, a paddleboard along
Yeah.
the way. You've got some.
you learn.
Okay, so you've learned, and then thinking about being the captain, navigating your kids through emotions. How prepared do you feel to embark out on the sea of emotion? A lot of you are there right now. How is that? How's your journey across the sea going so far?
Across the sea. I like that.
Every day we wait to see if there's
Eternal.
gonna be a storm.
Okay. So you're watching the weather.
Yeah.
You're scanning the horizon for the
Checking
clouds.
every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're in good company with many parents, caregivers through the ages. So Ellie and Katie touched on this before. Kids at this age, friendships, socially being accepted, being cool, all those things are really important to them. And so they may be not expressing their emotions in the same way because of that, not to mention all the things that Katie talked about with the thinking and the feeling brain and all those things together. So they might not be expressing their emotions in the same way. They may be stuffing, as you talked about, or stonewalling you, or might be coming out all over the place, just like a tsunami. So John Gottman, he's a famous psychologist, he wrote a book called Raising the Emotionally Intelligent Child, and we have a copy for each of you as a gift, and thank you for letting us present this information to you. And he came up with 5 main points for coaching your child in their emotions. And the first one is simple, but as we talked about, not based upon how you grew up, what your own experience was with emotions, and that is being aware of just emotion in general, and that starts with your own feelings and your emotions in the moment. If your child is completely flooded and then you become flooded, if I become flooded and react, no one is talking to anyone. It's just a wall of water that we can't see through. So being aware of where you are at emotionally first is really important when approaching coaching. And it might be appropriate to even share your emotion at that point. That might break this kind of standoff between you. You can say, I'm angry right now. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to take a step back, and then we'll talk about this. And this is modeling to your child that it is okay to put your emotions out in an appropriate way. The second thing, which can be so difficult, is recognizing those emotional storms, those hurricanes, as an opportunity, not a natural disaster. It's a chance to connect emotionally with them and to teach them. And so this usually involves something like taking a deep breath in, like the bubble exercise that we did at the beginning. Maybe you need to figure out, where is my bubble? No one needs to be in my bubble with me right now. And take that moment to tell yourself, okay, this is a moment to connect. This is not a natural disaster. where we can bring this from a category 5 all the way down to column C's again. And this can keep you from being pulled out into the surf where you're both just churning in the waves of what is going on. The next thing would be to listen, which also seems simple, but if you yourself are angry or frustrated, as happens with adolescents, I think, daily for parents, it can be difficult to hear them, and you want to validate. And what that doesn't look like, which I think I myself as a parent fell into this all the time, I wanted to ask the big W. Does anybody know what I'm thinking? The question that starts with the W? The why? Why are you doing this? Why are you crying? Why are you angry? Why did you punch your brother? Why did you slam the door? The thing is that, number one, based upon what we were talking about with brain activity, they might not know why.
That's what he screams about it. I don't know.
I don't know. Yes. Why did you do that? I don't know. And a lot of times they don't know, or they don't want to tell you. They do know, but they don't want to, they don't want to admit it. So what can work better is to say, it sounds like you're frustrated. It looks like you're angry. You can even say, I see that you're crying. That seems really obvious in the moment, but for them, they can feel, your child can feel like you see them where they are at in that moment in their emotion, and you're not trying to immediately go all the way to the end and fix it. You're sending them that message, I see you right now, and I'm with you in it. Which is why, going back to the step before, it's important to center yourself and tell yourself, this is a teachable moment, because all this is swirling like this waves going up and down, and it can just be frustrating, and you can want to say, who said it? Go to your room, which is probably why our parents do that, because it's really difficult. So then the next step would be to help your child find the words to label what's going on. And that can come from starting with, I see that you're crying. It seems like you're frustrated. You might need to name a range of emotions before you get it, and then you can talk to them about what that means. Oh, you're sad, Oh, it makes sense that you're sad. You got an F on the coloring packet that you worked on for months. And I can understand why you're sad about that. And many people would feel sad for putting that amount of work into it. So if you're trying to help them identify what they're feeling, because they may not know. And this again is also modeling for them that taking that step to figure out what's happening inside and not just being pulled along. And then the final step is to explore how to solve this with limits. So I want you all to hear me that encouraging emotional expression does not mean that there are not consequences for behavior or actions or necessary discipline that might need to happen. It means I'm with you. You're saying to your child, I'm with you in the moment, and I want to help you figure out what your feelings are, and I want to help you regulate your feelings. It's not saying you shouldn't feel that way, or you should. And you might be thinking, you should be sorry. Like, it was not okay to just smack your brother or take something that didn't belong to you or slam the door. But in that moment, you're just saying to them, I accept you in how you're feeling. However, I'm not going to accept all of your behaviors. Yes, I see that this is maybe resonating with you a little, Sharon. And there's a big difference between that, because some people might look at this and say, well, if you're not even addressing what's happening or what they did, and that can come down the line, but this is an opportunity if you can summon up the energy and maintain your cool to look at this as, we're going to deal with the consequences of what you did, but along the way, this is a powerful moment to teach you about what was happening for you to begin with. What got stirred up inside of you so much that you had this happen?
I think of this in terms of like when kids are punching holes in the wall or something.
Mm-hmm.
You just why are you punching a hole in the wall? And then, first just being like, no, what's going on that you got so angry that you needed to kind of punch that hole in the wall?
Yeah.
And also, we have consequences. You have to, maybe your allowance is taking this, you have to fix the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that.
Exactly.
When they're back in the calm water.
Right.
And
yes.
kind of
Yeah, when you come back to shore
Yeah.
and you're floating in the shallow end, then you're definitely following up with the consequence.
Yeah.
And that's a great example. And this is a different way of looking at things. This is definitely different than the way that I was parented when I was growing up, or honestly, even how I parented my own kids. It's a completely different approach. But I like this a lot because it brings in the fact that consequences are important to learn. And kids, they need structure and discipline. They need to know what is expected of them. But helping them try to identify what is happening in these moments can make a difference down the line with what their choices are.
Well, they always want the walls.
Yes.
If they don't have the walls, they're going to push you to your mate.
Right. Yeah. You're recognizing the need
Right.
for that boundary and that structure in your home. That's very true. So thinking about this whole idea of being the captain, what do you think? Does that seem like a peaceful day at sea, floating with a book and some lemonade? Or what do you think when you imagine yourself as the emotional coach or the captain? Like, how does that seem doable, scary, encouraging, all of the above?
I think it's something you have to face when you grow up and have these children.
Yeah.
This is a part of the job.
Yeah.
And if you avoid it, then all you're going to have is just going to keep coming up until you're going to step up to the plate.
Yeah. It will, their emotions definitely will keep coming up over and over
If
again.
you jump in the car and go to the bar every time, they're watching.
Yeah, it might not resolve it completely. The thought of tackling it in this way can be daunting for a lot of parents, but Gottman, before he wrote this book, he studied many families that were doing this, and he found that the kids, it was a huge impact to them. Their grades were higher, they were physically healthier, they had sickness often, which makes sense because they weren't, if they're not bottling everything up as much inside and feeling as stressed, then they were healthier. They got along better with their friends. He found that they took what they were learning and brought that into their relationships. They had less behavioral issues. And for kids that had angry outbursts, those went down. They were less prone to explode and become angry. So like I said, we brought you all a copy of that book. So we hope that you will, in your spare time, this is a really, really good book. It has some really great tips. It's written simply, it's easy to read, and it goes in more in depth about these strategies of how to coach. I just briefly went through. You're already laughing, Sharon.
So are any of these studies you guys are doing, are any of them based on grandparents raising grandkids? Because this whole emotional thing, you can multiply it times 100.
Right.
Yes,
I
you
mean,
definitely
Right,
could.
trauma.
with
Yeah.
trauma, you throw all that stuff in
Yes.
there, you know, abuse.
Yeah.
And, I mean, a lot of these kids were getting, or have,
Right.
been through probably, that's why we have them, obviously,
Yes.
because their parents are in jail or
Yeah.
down at the bar.
Right.
Or,
Yeah, in addition to that, our ages.
and then our
Makes a big
ages.
difference. Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean,
I just want to be grandma someday.
yes, you would like to be in your
I hate
role.
being the discipline. I
as-
hate setting boundaries. I
Yeah.
want them to come to my house and explode the boundaries and send them back to their damn parents. Right? Say, get care of them now that I ruined them for the day. Instead, I'm going through all the above, and it's
Yeah.
no fun being a
No.
grandma.
No. Yeah, it's a tough job, and definitely that trauma does compound. I can't think of any studies that we looked at that were specific to kids with trauma and emotional development, but I do know a lot of the things that we're talking about today have been proven to make an impact on families. So I would say that there's nothing that is beyond hope with what you're dealing with already. And you all are really resilient and open to doing whatever that you can for your kids. That's what I've observed in knowing you for the last couple of years. And so I guess you're not out anything trying it.
Right.
And it sounds like you are recognizing the uniqueness of your situation in that you are parenting your children's children and you are gaining children that have struggled with trauma. So all the more, I think, to focus on trying to do things to increase their emotional wellness. Ellie has something else that's fun that we made for you that she's going to go through. Just another trick that you can use at home to work on when emotions get high with your kids. And so she's going to take you through that.
We figured maybe we'd need a little activity after we've been sitting for a couple minutes talking. So each of you guys have a jar in front of you. This is an activity that we did in class, and we felt it was going to be a really beneficial activity for you guys to do too. And it fit in with our ocean thing, thankfully. So these are jars that you can use with your grandchildren when you want to talk about emotions. It's a nice way to segue into conversation without feeling too pushy or like you're prying. Because we know as soon as you start to push, they pull back. They don't want anything to do with that. So this is a good way to talk about in terms of metaphors again. If you're thinking of the ocean, let's say, you can think about how it's storming and it's shaking you up inside, and all of these glitter particles are getting messed up and swirled around. Or you can think about those swirling thoughts. A lot of the times, hopelessness is described as this swirling behavior. Worry is described as this swirl that you're being drugged down into. Or maybe some currents where it's just pulling you from side to side. So if you guys want to shake it up, and then if you want to just set it down on the table, and if we try to take a step back and watch that glitter settle, maybe all of that sand that was just whipped up into the water after that storm, and notice how long it takes for all of that glitter to calm down. Notice how long it takes for our children's emotions to calm down. And even as this glitter has started to settle, how many little particles are still up there? And how even just one piece of glitter can represent a little bit of anger, and how that little bit of anger can still be there and hold on after time, even after minutes of trying to calm down. How it still is turned up inside of us. So these are pretty fun tools. We used to use them. I've worked in preschools, I've worked in middle schools, I've worked in high schools. We use them with all age groups. People call them calm jars. We call them silly jars in preschool. Chill jars, all sorts of things. There's all sorts of activities online if you guys want to look them up. And all sorts of different metaphors. You don't have to stick with the ocean thing, but all sorts of different metaphors that you can use with them. And these are for you to take home.
Good.
So yeah.
I'm thinking ahead of me.
They're fun to make with kids too, but they can be very messy. So yeah.
I've been through glitter.
Yes, former teacher Sharon has done it all.
Oh yeah. Glitter in the preschools was everywhere. It was going to be a tough day when we were using glitter. So yeah, and even for yourself, this is my personal one from home, and I use it while I'm doing homework all the time. I think of myself as just being so shooken up, so stressed out, and then I shake it, I take a step back from myself, and I just really try to focus on that, and think about myself and my internal state, and think about how long is it going to take me to calm down today? How long is it going to take me for all of that stress and anxiety to calm down enough so that I can fall asleep tonight? So there's lots of different ways.
And even the little globes from Christmas.
Yeah.
And all I do is take the snowman to be happy.
So yeah, there's another tangible sort of activity that you can use with kids. Some kids are very visual. I'm a very visual person, so having things like this was always really beneficial for me. So yeah, and then Sarah's going to speak a little bit about mindfulness.
Yes, this is the last part of our presentation. So
There's one more.
Oh.
That's okay.
Second to last part of our presentation. So I just wanted to bring your attention to this handout. So we have those 5 tips on the emotion coaching that Tracey just talked about, and there's some tips on mindfulness, which I will go through. Here's one of our books that we recommend along with the names of others down at the bottom. So just wanted you guys to have like a handout, and on the reverse, we have a handy dandy visual for you to remember, and you can do with this what you will. Put it up on in your room, in the kitchen, keep it in your car, staple it to your forehead, whatever you need to do to remember that this is a temporary phase. It might be a really long phase, and I have an adolescent myself, and so I know, it's like, okay, take it down a notch. So if we see the waves here, they represent these rising tides of emotion, right? Like these big feelings. And I just put a few there, but we could put any emotion here, and you can relate that to your own child. And then if we see like your understanding that you offer to the child, along with time and giving them space without pushing away, then we can get to this calmness, this self-regulation, this happiness, whatever is the goal for the child. And we know that the sun, there is a little ray of hope always, even in the darkest of times, even in the biggest emotions, that there is still hope there for them. So mindfulness. Before we started doing all of this and before all of our counselor training, I was like, nah, that's just, a thing that other people do. I don't do that. I was raised kind of how you guys were raised, where we stuff the emotions, we zip it. My parents were overwhelmed, they didn't want to hear it. So, okay, learned how to just really package it real nice into a box and just shove it far away. And with mindfulness, I've learned, mindfulness is living in the present moment and just being. So that's a state of being compassionate with yourself. So instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, why do I feel this way? We're saying, I feel this way and I'm not judging myself for feeling that way. It is what it is. It's observation without criticism. I observe how I feel, I observe the things around me, and I'm just being me here, myself. So if we think about mindfulness, it's an act of taking your life out of autopilot. So I was thinking about this, and I was like, what do I do on autopilot? Like my morning routine, right? Get up, do the same thing. Open the kids' doors, wake them up, brush my teeth, get the dogs out, all these things. I do the same thing every single day, okay? And mindfulness will say, does that serve you? Do you like the order in which you do things? Or is that just something that you've learned to do? You've done it forever, so you keep doing it. In mindfulness, we say, actually, I'd like to drink my coffee before I even wake up the kids. I'd like my own moments of silence. I'd like to put the dogs out first and go outside and have a breath of fresh air. So really paying attention to those things that we put no thought into, that we just do to get them.
But we need those too, don't we?
Yeah, routine.
Right.
Yes, routine is a lovely, wonderful thing, especially for kids. The purpose of mindfulness is to choose those things daily. So if you say, I eat a cherry-flavored yogurt every day for breakfast, maybe think about it and you're like, I actually don't like that flavor that much. I'm just used to buying it. Maybe I prefer to eat a lemon yogurt. Very simple things. We're not talking about these huge existential, thoughts of who I am in the world, or, you got to start small with mindfulness. So basically thinking, what decisions are we making and why? Even just small day-to-day decisions. Do these things work for us, or are we just used to them? That's a big thought, and that's a big thought for me too, because I do a lot of things on autopilot. And just bringing that awareness to myself. Do I like doing it that way? Do I like driving the kids that route to school, or is there another way I can go? Things like that. I think of mindfulness because as have you ever tried having a discussion with somebody and they're scrolling on their phone? Okay, we know this, right? Everybody's been in that conversation. Maybe you were the person, maybe you've been with the person. Let's just say we're being with the person who's scrolling. There's not a chance that they are totally engaged in the conversation. Even if they reply to you, even if they are ahhing you, yeah, okay. there's not a chance that they are fully engaged in the conversation that you're having. And how frustrating that is. And that's kind of mindfulness. Instead of scrolling, even if you're not looking at the phone, even if you're just doing it, we're saying, put that down. I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to give you 100% of my attention, and I'm going to be present in the moment. Whether that's a conversation at the bank, whether that's a conversation with a child, whatever that may be. I'm just being in that one moment without having to multitask. And multitasking is important. I understand that too. I'm saying this is just the beginning of these thoughts. So when I think about multitasking going there, I think about being busy. Am I busy because all this stuff really needs to get done? Or am I filling my time? There's a difference, right? If I need to get the kids here, I need to get them there, I need to get one picked up and one dropped off, and those are things I need to get done. What about other times in my life? Am I filling space because I feel guilty for taking time for myself? Am I wanting to get things done that maybe don't need to get done, or I can ask somebody else for help? These kinds of things. Just be bringing awareness to the choices that we make. So why is mindfulness important for adolescents? Well, as we talked about, this is a time of fluctuating emotions, this rising tide of emotions, and the crashes, the highs, the lows. And poor mental health in adolescents can be a predictor of emotional health challenges in adults. So if you have poor mental health as an adolescent, you're more than likely can have poor mental health as an adult. A surprising statistic that I found was that anxiety disorders in adolescents have a 32% prevalence rate. 1 in 3 adolescents will be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. We're not just talking about they feel anxious, we're saying that they're diagnosed with this. And mindfulness has found, there's lots of studies about mindfulness in kids and adults, a ton in adults, but we're talking about adolescents here, have been found to mitigate the effects of bullying. So if they're bullied at school, if they can learn how to be mindful, it can mitigate some of those negative effects. It can enhance focus in kids with ADHD. It can reduce attention problems and improve mental health and kids' social skills. So how do you start being mindful? Like, how do you tell a kid, like, just be in the moment? Because they're just like, yeah, okay, whatever.
But
Yes.
they are in the now.
Yeah.
That's where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they live. And adults don't always pay attention to that. I have to remind my husband all the time.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that tomorrow or whatever he's talking about now.
You're so right, Sharon. They live today.
That's
What's
right.
important to me now, today? What is
So
this big feeling
we
I
have
feel today?
to teach it in that awareness or whatever, and make them aware of where they're at and why it's important.
Right. You are so right. I can tell you've been around many kids. So to relay this message of mindfulness to children, we say it in an age-appropriate way. If we start talking to them about autopilot, they're going in autopilot because they're like, okay, I don't even understand what autopilot means. I don't know that word. So you know your kids the best, so you relay this to them in whatever way that you feel would kind of resonate with them. Age-appropriate mindfulness practices include the exercises that we were just talking about. This is mindfulness. Just staring at this and watching until the last glitter falls. The bubble. That's mindfulness, being aware of who you are, where you are in this exact moment. The best way I found to teach mindfulness to an adolescent is to practice with them. So offer to practice mindfulness with the child. They learn best by example, even if they tell you that they don't want you to do it with them. Right? How many things did we learn by example, even when we were like, oh, I don't. Okay, now I know how to do it. I'm good. I saw them do that. I saw them fail, so I'm going to do it the other way. Kids learn really well by example. And another thing is to try to practice it daily. It takes weeks of trying a new behavior for it to become a habit. And once it becomes a habit, children with higher experiences of mindfulness are able to be more flexible. So they're not so rigid, they're not so black and white. It's my way or it's nothing. They can be like, okay, sure. They can try and they can increase that flexibility within themselves, which means that they are able to understand how they currently feel and that it's just temporary. Kids who practice mindfulness are able to say, I feel very angry right now, if they can name the emotion or not. They understand that the feeling will go away, that it will turn into something else. The crest of their wave will become calm seas at some point. They're more able to ride the wave of emotion and accept it non-judgmentally. Because I'm angry, that doesn't mean I'm an angry person. That just means I'm experiencing anger. And it's okay. My grandma said it was okay. She's been angry. It's okay for her. It's okay for me. She's not an angry person, so why am I saying that I'm an angry person? I feel anxious. That doesn't mean I'm an anxious person. This is just normal. It's okay. You know, Grandpa showed me that it's okay to do this.
And we're teaching this mindfulness, but yet some of the people in the child's world just lay stuff on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're lazy, you're this, you're that. And they respect and look up to these people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my grandma says I'm not lazy, but what does she know?
Sure.
Yeah. So
Sure.
it's, you have to, that awareness has to be expanded in certain situations so that they can see that.
Definitely. And we can only control what we can control.
Right.
We can't control these other people. And yes, we can try our best and talk to them like, hey.
But I'm talking about if we can make them aware.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about the child or the other people in the child's life?
The child.
Mm-hmm.
If you can make them aware that,
Yes.
you know, Mrs. Bocall, that's the way she works. And that's,
Yeah.
you know, how she feels.
Right.
But that label is not you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
And that's exactly what mindfulness is. You can hear all these things from outside sources. You can see the behavior, the actions of other people, and you can accept it for what it is and say, that's not me.
Mhm.
That's what mindfulness is.
Mhm.
You don't internalize that. You don't
Right.
stuff it. You don't put it in a nice little box and jam it down.
and even peers, oh, you look so ugly in here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look at all those pimples.
Mm-hmm. And mindfulness in adults, so if we say a mindful adolescent, that grows up to be a mindful adult, and they have greater life satisfaction and higher self-esteem.
Mhm.
So if we're building this up in adolescence, then as an adult, they can see the fruit of what they've practiced and what we've practiced with them.
I always think of it as though you can kind of decide how if somebody's calling you lazy and you're like, no, I don't really like how that like sits with me. I don't really want that.
Mhm.
I'm gonna put that elsewhere. That's not on me. That's on them. They tried that and that's not my bubble protected me or something. I don't know.
Right, and I always figured, for me personally, like I would get there when I was an adult. I saw adults not really caring what other people thought, or I saw them caring what people thought. But I thought, when I'm an adult, I'll get that awareness. Somehow I'll find it. And I realize now, that's,
Yeah.
it's been a really lot of long, hard years teaching this to myself. You don't find it. You don't turn 21, 25, or 30 and be like, here it is. I don't care what anybody has to say about me. It's like, this really sucks. How can I change this? And if you even do get there. So we're offering this mindfulness and this training to kids. So they don't have to make it so it doesn't have to be so hard for them. So how do we practice mindfulness? There's lots of apps. There's lots of YouTube videos. You know, kids love their YouTube. There's plenty of games that you can play. So we have these mindfulness cards, and I put it on there. You can find them on Amazon. I mean, you can consult Google. We have the jars. We have lots of things. Another way of practicing mindfulness is meditation. And when I initially thought of meditation, I was like, oh, I don't do that. That's not for me. That's a little too out there for my liking. But then I learned that meditation doesn't have to be like this long, drawn-out process. I don't have an hour to sit and just be one with myself. You can do it in 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And this is a building block of mindfulness for adolescents. So we're going to try one now. And I promise you, I use it with my kids. I find it helpful. Let's see if this can connect. This is only going to be a 3-minute meditation. So you can see what this is like for kids.
Feel eternal though, kids.
3 minutes? In the beginning, absolutely. In the beginning, they're like, okay, are we done? Are you happy? Like, I close my eyes for a minute. Are we done? And so this is a building block. This is building up. I know definitely with my kids, they were like, gotta stand up, gotta move my body, like sitting for 3 minutes. And then I just tried to make it fun. Like, if we can get through this meditation, then we'll eat dinner on the floor. Or we'll have a picnic or something. Just an enticement to getting kids to do something. And now they're like, okay. So now my kids are like, okay, are we going to do the loving kindness meditation or are we going to do the breathing space? So I'm like, it works sometimes. Just trying my best, right? We're all just trying our best in this. So, let's see. We're going to do...
Welcome to the sober coping space.
Okay. So if we want to just relax, I promise you it's only 3 minutes. I'm not going to trick you into a long one. Yeah. Get comfy. This guy's voice is amazing. I love him. I listen to all his meditations, and I put the link on there for you. It's called Guided Meditations for Teens, but you can use it for any age of kids. Okay, here we go.
Sober stands for stop, observe, breathe, expand, and respond. Before beginning this practice, bring to mind a difficulty in your life, something that you're willing to stay present with for a few minutes. When you have this difficulty in mind, simply stop. Stop whatever it is that you are doing and whatever it is that you are about to do. Observe what's happening in your body, noticing if there's any sensations present, any signs of stress or tension, and simply allowing them to be there without needing to change anything, without needing to fix anything. Checking in with your emotions, noticing if there are any difficult emotions present right now, like stress or anxiety or sadness or anger. Being aware of that emotion and bringing kindness. Breathing in, I'm aware of this emotion. Breathing out, I smile to this emotion. Noticing where your thoughts are. Noticing if you are ruminating right now, experiencing repeated negative thoughts, or if your mind is being pulled off into the past or into the future. With the next breath in, gathering your awareness. With the next breath out, bringing your awareness just to the breath. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. In, out. Every time your mind wanders off, as best you can, simply noticing that and bringing your awareness back to the breath. In, out. Breathing in, gathering your awareness. Breathing out, expanding your awareness to the whole body, noticing any sensations that are present in your body. Are they the same or are they different than earlier? Checking in with your emotions and feelings, just noticing what's happening in your emotions and if they're the same or different, allowing them to be just as they are. And checking in with your thinking, just noticing where your mind is right now. And then as best you can, responding to the situation with mindfulness and compassion.
Alrighty. So that was our 3-minute guided meditation.
Really fast.
Yeah, it was nice. They have a 5-minute meditation on there called Loving Kindness, where you bring to mind somebody you have a great relationship with, a tentative relationship, and a very difficult relationship with. And you send them loving kindness. So you can receive it for yourself. You might not, you might not be able to change that dynamic of the relationship, but you can give yourself space and grace to move forward. So thank you guys. That's the end of the mindfulness portion. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
That was really good. I also thought, I don't have time to meditate, but I see it differently now that we've been in this class. It's not, I pictured it as sitting cross-legged on a mat and breathing in and out for an hour, and I thought, oh, that's good for that. But I do find myself trying to take more breaths during the day and pay attention to what's happening with my stress. So I think that can be powerful to do as a family, especially in those heated moments where things are getting really out of kind of swirling and stormy again. So the last thing, I just touch on this real briefly because we're getting to the end of our time together, but so another way that you can, as parents, support emotional wellness in your kids is time together. And it's sort of this weird tension with adolescents where their peers are important and everything about their friends is what they're thinking about. And so there's this idea that kids just don't want to spend time with their parents, and what's the point, and it will just not be good if we spend time together. What I found looking into this was kids may not say, I want to spend time with you, but they need it. Because adolescence is a really stressful time, like we've talked about. So much is going on inside of them and outside of their world socially. So time with family is a break from all the other stress, where they can be themselves more than they can at school and with their peers. And a lot of research has been centered around what kind of activities are best for kids. And some people think, well, we can't do activities because I don't have money, and their friends are going off to Hawaii or Disney World. And especially for all of you, a lot of you are, you're on your retirement income, and then you're raising a whole other set of kids again. So that can be a lot of pressure. And every month we talk about the free and intensive activities around those, and I left you all with one again. This time I try to put nothing over $5 on here. And the research shows that it doesn't have to be these big, huge quality experiences where you're spending a ton of money and doing all these things. It's just time together where you're connecting. And one of the things that was really prevalent in looking at what impacted kids is super simple, and that's meal time. That's time around together, having a meal at least a few times a week. I mean, families are busy. I think it's difficult for every family to think realistically that they're going to have every single meal together. Our world just doesn't work that way anymore. And it may not even be you can have dinner every night, but making mealtime a priority time where you're connecting as a family can go a long way with helping your child. And research has shown that kids that do, they studied a lot of families that did meals together, and they looked at how they did it, and they looked at the impact on the kids. And those kids, again, It was some of the same benefits that we heard from emotional coaching, where they had higher grades, they related better to people, and because they're communicating with their family. And it's also an opportunity to talk about your values and to bring that back in, because you're not in control of them like they were when they were little. They're influenced by the world and technology and friends and school. So this is a chance where you have them kind of as a captive audience, and you can impart some of those family values back, whether they want to hear them or not. Like Sarah said, they may seem resistant, but it's going to be trickling in there at some point if they are consistently influenced by you at least once during the day. And there's a really cool organization. It's called the Family Dinner Project, and this is a group that got together and said, we really want families to know the value of eating together. We feel like this is a lost thing in our society now. And on their website, they have recipes and resources, ways to start conversations, and you have some little cards that I downloaded. I just downloaded and printed a few for you. There were so many on there, like 30 different categories of types of, they call them recipes for conversations. And then there were just probably 100 more small cards that you could print off, and each card has a different theme, sharing hopes and dreams, or talking about love, or managing stress. I also gave you a few blank ones, and you could make these yourself. You could make up some topics of conversation to have around the dinner table with your kids. A few of the ideas from the website that I thought were neat was 2 truths and a tall tale. And this can work if you have kids that don't talk. I know when my son was around this age, and my daughter too, they would get in the car and I would say, how was your day? Fine. What did you do? Nothing. And I didn't know at the time the importance of open-ended questions like we talked about earlier. But if you say, tell me 2 things that happened in your day, and then make something up, and I'm going to try to guess, you can find out about their day, because they're telling you 2 more things than they said when they got in the car. So they're really, this program is really cool, and it really advocates families making that commitment to eat together and be mindful in the process. One family, to deal with technology, they put a basket in the middle of the table, and everyone had to put their phones in it. And I think you could do this with your extended family too. And the first person touched their phone, it was their night to do the dishes. Also, turn off the TV, and if you're really feeling, turn on some music, and if you're really feeling wild, another family let their kids take turns choosing the music for dinner. And then they discussed, it was a great conversation piece. Now you could put limits on what kind of music, because you might not want to listen to all of their music that they listen to, but there's a lot of value in spending that time together around the dinner table, or it could be the breakfast table, it could be the sidelines at soccer practice. You might bring a picnic. If you've got kids doing different sports or music or going different directions, you might have to get creative in how. But
we have snack time.
Snack time. Okay. Yes.
Evening. That seems to be a good time.
Okay. Yeah, a time to connect over the table, and it doesn't have to be. Yeah, you don't have to. Watermelon. Okay. Yeah. So
I think it's important too when you have family time to let them invite a friend over.
Okay.
And share within the family, because then at that age they're growing up and they're not the best friend. To them.
We talked about that earlier. They're separating from you.
Right.
And
That seems to work really well.
Yeah. So you're acknowledging that need for them to connect with their peers, and you're bringing them in to connect as a family too, and maybe bringing the opportunity to bring some of your influence this other child that's coming into your home too, to see the value of meals. And I think that also another thing that I learned from this that I thought was interesting was it was a learned behavior. So kids that ate meals were more likely to carry that on when they were older and they had their own children. It was something that would strongly influence them to carry that forward. And so that's the point of this family dinner project, is bringing it. So I encourage you to use these questions with your kids, and then make some of your own and put them in the middle of the table. The other thing too is sometimes it's less threatening for your child to talk to you about things if it's coming from a card versus just having to say it.
Right.
You know, they could put questions on there and put them in, you could pull them out and read them, and that can be a chance for them to open up and feel less pressure to talk. If they feel like you're just looking at them, waiting to talk, then no, I'm not going to talk to you. So this is kind of a neutral tool to talk.
Yeah, interestingly, when I was looking at this family dinner time, one of the questions was talk about a time when you ate dinner at a friend's house, which is funny. You can incorporate all these things. Like we can talk about friends. We don't need to talk about, just specifically. We don't talk about emotions or just your day. Let's talk about friends. Like share a time when you ate dinner at your friend's house.
Yep.
And I was like, that's a really good one.
Yeah, there was a lot of ideas to talk about, and there was everything from science to the world, animals, your childhood. So it doesn't have to be big, serious emotion, feeling type topics, and you could gear it towards your child, what they are interested in.
When I worked at the group home, we did this, and we could have up to 8 kids, and then 2 staff, and then the therapist and me, the manager, and we would all come together. And it's not a typical family structure, of course, it's a group home, but that was kind of the idea. And we would always do highs and lows for the kids, and they loved it. And we're talking about teenagers here, and this was 12 to 17. And if we didn't do it, one of them said, well, aren't we going to do highs and lows? Because they wanted to talk to each other and know how their days, give them insight into each other too, to get to know each other and staff. And so it really did create a family dynamic where maybe there would not have otherwise been one. So yeah, it was really meaningful.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We've done that as a group quite a few times that we've gotten together.
As a family, we used to do what we called the alphabet game. And so the kids would know first thing in the morning that today was going to be C or whatever, and then everybody had to come to the table with a subject with that letter.
That's good.
And we do that, every day at dinner. So. But they had all day to think about it, so then they could, do I want to just talk about a cat or do I want to talk about Christmas?
Very creative.
That is creative. Yeah.
That's very creative. Yeah, thanks for sharing those other ideas. I think what I thought about this too is it's sort of a double opportunity for an activity, because if you're brainstorming about things that you can do during dinner, you're spending time, you're getting more bang for your buck because you're spending time as a family coming up with that and helping kids plan the meal, and all those things are a way to really make that more of a family thing than just sitting around the table.
Yeah, I think that's the end of our presentation, the end of our